Dr. Beth Molleson.
And I'm Dr. Alyssa Watson.
And thank you all for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom today, where we have short conversations and chat informally about relevant topics in vet med. And today we're going to focus on talking a little bit about rescue groups and, of course, all the wonderful work they do. But after some personal experiences with some difficulty adopting from rescue groups, we're going to talk about some of the philosophies behind some of those more maybe extreme adoption protocols that I think many of us have run across. And of course, this goes without saying, but I definitely want to state it anyway. I think we can all agree that the work of so many shelter workers, rescue workers, often on a volunteer basis, of course, saves the lives of animals day in and day out. Makes our world a much better place, all the things they do for pets and society. And of course, those of us who have benefited from having a rescue best friend in our house. And the reason we kind of, this idea came to mind for us is I have been on the hunt. I think I've mentioned it here maybe a few times, but for a second dog. And I guess it had been a while for me, but I kind of forgot that the adoption process is a little bit wild or can be wild. So I wanted to talk through that. And before we go any further, Alyssa, I kind of wanted to ask you, because I feel like as vets, I don't know, maybe I'm being an extremist, but it almost feels like we as veterinary professionals fall into two groups. A lot of people who are really big into rescue pets, and then maybe a lot of other people that like to support, very regimented breeders and reputable breeders and things like that. So Alyssa, I want to hear where you've acquired your pets previously.
Yeah, so thanks. That's a good question. Most of my pets have kind of fallen into my lap a little bit. And so there hasn't been a concerted effort, to go through a rescue organization or to go out and adopt for me. And I don't know if that kind of is a holdover from just the way that I grew up. I grew up in Iowa. My grandfather had a dairy farm. There were multiple times where I would go visit and climb up into the hayloft and find some kitten that had been born a few weeks before, and it would end up in the car on the way home with us. And so
I love that.
That was kind of my experience growing up, was that you just acquired pets from, the people in your neighborhood, or somebody's dog had a litter, and there were puppies in a box out front. My first heart dog was a Great Dane, and I had wanted a Great Dane. I had specifically wanted a Great Dane. But again, I felt like it was one of those things that just fell into my lap. I went to Starbucks. I'm probably dating myself here because I'm old and we used the paper, but I went to Starbucks and I was reading the paper.
That does sound funny, but yes, no judgment.
They used to have the classifieds in the paper, and yeah. I was reading the paper, and I opened the classifieds, and the very first thing at the top of the classifieds was, these was Great Dane puppies, for sale. And so I thought, well, this is what I wanted, and here it is staring me in the face today, so I'm going to go do that.
In my newspaper.
Newspaper, which I don't think anybody does anymore. So, but I know that you have had some more, experiences, especially recently, with specifically trying to, adopt an animal. So can you tell us a little bit about what's been going on?
Absolutely. So anybody that has listened to this podcast before has heard me talk about Paul, my dachshund. My other half, perfect boy. He's far from perfect. He's a dachshund, but I got him through a rescue group, and the Ohio, just like a dachshund specific rescue group. And overall that, so that was about 6 years ago. And that was a relatively simple experience. But one of the interesting things, and I thought at the time that it was kind of a unique experience, was that I could tell the person who had him, she kind of ran this rescue organization, and the person that had him really was reluctant to give him to me. He was advertised on Pet Finder. I thought, like many of us, I thought, oh, I'm a shoo-in. I'm a vet. Like, of course, we'll lead with that. Tell them I'm a vet. And she canceled a home visit a few times. Finally, I convinced her, there was one day she wanted to cancel because it was raining. I was like, please just come anyway. I took the weekend off because I want to adopt him. she comes over and just basically starts telling me about how he's not a very good dog. And, she just doesn't know why anybody would want him. And it was very eye opening to me because I think in my mind before that, I had thought, we have so many rescue pets that need to be adopted. Surely the process is as simple as these rescue volunteers wanting to give them away left and right. And that kind of was the first realization I had where these people get attached to these dogs. They really, and that's my assumption, is that she was so attached to him that she just didn't want to let him go and was worried about the kind of life he would have. But I also at the same time was like, I'm a vet. I'm really not sure what other qualifications you would want in a home. And of course, the only reason I was allowed to even look at getting him was because I had a fence, which we can kind of get into some of those requirements. But that was, unusual to me. The fact that he was, I think it had been like maybe a year he had needed a home. He was on Pet Finder. And so it was strange to kind of come across that barrier. And Alyssa, I feel like you have mentioned before too, you've heard similar things where as vets, we think maybe we're a shoo-in for an adoption, but I know you've heard stories too.
I have absolutely heard stories about that. And because of that, before when we were talking about doing this episode, I actually put out, kind of a little, please share your stories with us on Facebook in a couple of the veterinary groups. And obviously got their permission. I said we were going to be using this for an episode. And we got quite a bit of feedback. It was a mix, which made me feel happy. There were definitely people that came back and said, oh, I said I was a vet. And they said, and the rescue said, you're a vet? Oh, here, take your pick, take 2, take 3. Which, again, as you were kind of saying, would be the reaction that I would almost expect. But on the flip side of that, there were people with stories that said specifically the rescue organization told them, we won't even consider a veterinarian, which made me wonder, we'll talk about fences and children and all of that, but it just made me wonder, are there other professions that they say, oh, we won't, like, oh, well, we won't consider a teacher, or, oh, we won't consider a court judge. I'm like, or a police officer, I'm like, why would a profession be something that would be an automatic, denial for placing a pet?
Yeah, that is very interesting. And of course, there's a lot of, I guess, different reasons or ways you could read into that as to what, was it the schedule? Was it the fact that maybe they thought there'd be too many other pets, or, pets around, like pets coming in and out, if that's the vision they had of a veterinarian and the, kind of life they lead, I guess, is a possibility. But yeah, I wonder if they, do they discriminate against people who have in-home daycares and have kids around, people who travel for work? It does make you wonder, like you said, if there are other professions that they're screening as diligently as vets. So that's very interesting. Or maybe there was one bad experience with a vet. I mean, there's so many hypotheses about why that could be, but that is very strange. Fortunately, I have not run across that yet.
That's good. What were some of the conditions that you have, that you've encountered this time around when you've been looking?
So trying to acquire Paul a friend. So I have had greyhounds previously, wonderful, beautiful, perfect dogs. And I contacted a greyhound rescue group this time. Of course, I again lead with the big bold letters of I'm a vet, previous greyhound owner. Of course, I'm thinking they should want me to have all their dogs. And they respond with, oh, we don't adopt people with kids under the age of 10, which maybe I'm naive, but I was shocked by that because to me, I feel like greyhounds in particular are a breed that do seem to get along pretty well with young kids, at least in my experience. Every greyhound's different. I feel like once you have kids, you're fairly settled. You're not traveling. A lot of times you're not traveling every weekend. You're not going to be the people who then suddenly have kids and then get rid of their dog because they decide to have kids. So that was really surprising to me, the fact that they made no exceptions for that. And I do think there is a statistic that says the majority of dog bites happen with kids under the age of 10. So my assumption is that they don't want to run the risk of, a dog bite, which of course can happen, and then the pet being relinquished or put to sleep or something like that. But to me, was just a very surprising thing to hear, to make a ubiquitous rule about. And that was not since then I've, tried to work with other rescue groups, and I think maybe one or two others have had a very similar rule of no kids under the age of 10. I think maybe one or two had occasional exceptions, but yeah, that was very surprising to me.
And along with the no children, another one that I have heard is no other pets or no other intact pets. Again, I can hypothesize and think, okay, this is likely, they don't want problems with inter-animal aggression or
Mhm.
those types of things. But on the flip side, how is that, does that discourage people from adopting these pets? Because we do know that people who open their home to animals and love animals are likely to have more pets.
Yes, absolutely. It's almost like you're a proven pet owner, and then suddenly that disqualifies you, which is interesting. And again,
Mhm.
I could see maybe certain pets who they have gotten to know and know wouldn't get along well with other pets. Of course, that
Yeah, that's
that might make sense.
completely different. If the animal
Right.
has a history
Exactly.
of difficulty with other animals or with other species, I
Right.
totally understand the would do best, in a home with no cats or in a home with
Exactly.
no other dogs.
Exactly. Even no kids, right? We understand all of those for individual pets. What's your thought on the fence roll, Alyssa? Because that's one that's always gotten to me. And even both of my greyhounds, I think I would have been disqualified if I hadn't been a vet student when I got them, because I didn't have a fence at the time. But that one has always gotten me, because the only times my pets have gotten away or loose has been because of like a fence issue.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if I hadn't had the fence, there would have been no problem. They wouldn't have escaped.
And they wouldn't have been out unattended or anything. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Again, just my upbringing, in Iowa,
Right.
we didn't have fences, and so I think a lot of this is probably very specific to, whether or not you're trying these rescues are in a really urban area, whether or not they're in a really rural area, because those things differ really significantly. And I personally don't see how having a fence will significantly impact your ability to give an animal a good lifelong home. So,
Right. Right. And one of the most extreme, when I was kind of looking into this, one of the most extreme things I found was an interesting rule where someone had tried to adopt a cat, and they had to sign a contract that they would have a certain number of litter boxes in their home, or else they could be fined. I think it was like up to $500. So that was a new one. I had never heard about contracts like that before.
I haven't, yeah. I wonder how, enforceable those contracts and everything are. I'm sure,
Right.
the the once you sign something like that, if somebody truly feels passionately about it and has the resources to go after you, I'm sure they probably are, enforceable.
Yeah, it's an interesting point for sure. And, of course, we bring all this up not because we want to bash any rescue groups. And I bet every rescue group out there would say that if they had unlimited staff and unlimited funds, of course, they could judge each home individually.
Mhm.
So I think there are a lot of points to be made for why some of these rules are put in place. And of course, I don't think any of us have doubts that these rescues are trying to find the very best life for the pet. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up was because my biggest concern is that these strict rules are potentially pushing people into the very thing that these rescue groups are trying to avoid, which is seeking pets from an easier source, whether it's buying from a pet store and potentially supporting backyard breeders, or buying from a breeder, of course, many of whom are reputable and responsible, but maybe some of whom are not. And that's kind of what's scary to me, because there have been many times throughout this process where I'm like, I don't really want a puppy.
Mhm.
I don't really want to go through a breeder, but if it takes much longer, maybe I will. Maybe
Right.
that's the route I meant to go right now with having young kids. So I think that's kind of one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up, is I feel like it's important to keep in mind at least to me, for the rescue groups to keep in mind what the goal is. And to me, the goal is to try to rehome as many of these pets so you can help the group of pets that are one step behind them and going to be needing homes soon too.
Yeah. And help, unite people with a new member of their family, I know you've been wanting to add this new member of your family for a little while now, and those relationships and those human animal bonds are the things that we really strive to support. So we are hoping that one of these days in our win of the week segment, we will get to hear that Dr. Beth got a new dog.
Oh, that's right. It's also like, I didn't know how much I wanted a new dog until that first person told me I couldn't have one. And now suddenly I'm like, I must find myself a second dog.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, Alyssa, I think that brings us to the win of the week. Are there any good uplifting wins in your life this week?
You know what? I did have a win. It wasn't super recent, but it was a big win, and I wanted to share it still, even though it wasn't super recent. So we had the Western States Veterinary Conference recently here in Las Vegas, and we had a little party with the brief team, and it had been so long since I had seen so many of these people in person because of COVID, and that was just so wonderful to be able to see so many people from the brief media team. You and I got to see each other in person, which is always fantastic. And so that was definitely my win.
That's a very good win. I didn't even think of that one, Alyssa. But yes, WVC is always a good time. For those who don't know, Clinicians Brief and Plums are both owned by Brief Media. And so, yeah, that party was wonderful. Got to connect with other vets, both in industry and out there in practice. So that was a lot of fun. I should have used that as my win of the week. My win of the week, I feel like mine are either always weather related or Elton John related. And today's going to be no exception. Mine is weather related because I feel like, especially by the time this airs, I can say we finally made it to spring. And I am one of those people who, I hate to say it, but just wishes winter away day by day as quickly as possible because I don't like cold weather. Mm-hmm. So there are things blooming in my neighborhood, and that is going to be my win today.
That's wonderful. I saw a meme yesterday on Facebook that was like, I'm ready to stop complaining about winter and start complaining about summer now.
That's exactly how I'm feeling. Yep. Fast forward to next week's episode where you can hear me complain about the heat. Oh, anyway. Well, Alyssa, I'm glad you tackled this conversation with me. Again, I certainly don't want to deter anyone from so many wonderful rescue groups out there, but just a topic I wanted to bring to the forefront for all of us to think about. Thank you to our audience for being out there listening. We will talk to you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Veterinary Breakroom. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including a video version on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. You can also listen to or watch our podcast episodes on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts, or drop us a line at podcasts@briefmedia.com. Veterinary Breakroom is a Brief Media production, produced by Alexis Ussery and co-hosted by Dr. Alyssa Watson and Dr. Beth Molleson.